Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the SkyTemple Podcast, an exercise in enthusiastic rambling about Explorers of Sky ROM hacks. My name is MaxSchersey, coming to you live from the US West Coast and from down under in Australia. I'm joined by yakkomon. So, I'm just now realizing this is week 5, and every time I write in the notes document that we are coming to you live, but that's actually just false. That's actually not true. However, I think we're going to continue that in. How are you doing right now, Yakko? How's it going?
I'm doing good. I've been loving the interviews so far, and just hearing what everyone has to say about their hacks. Like, it's been a journey, and it's just given me a greater appreciation of the scene. I mean, not that I didn't have it beforehand, but really it's just great just to really sort of connect with other hack makers and sort of build up this little community of ours. It's just been great.
Yeah, I agree. We've really gotten a lot of pretty interesting insights so far. That's kind of like the primary thing that's been keeping us going so far. I guess on that note, something I want to say is that the next episode is not going to be in 2 weeks. It is going to be 4 weeks from now. The reason why is because for me, it is there's the next couple weeks. There's a lot of summer vacation type of stuff going on. I got a concert next week, visiting some college friends. The week after that, and then got another concert the week after that. So, I hope you guys understand that I'm not going to prioritize working on this podcast over any of that stuff. But we'll be back on, what would it be? August 24th? August 24th. That about lines up with our us having to have like a second wave of people to interview too, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if you've been listening and you've been like, I really want to be interviewed, and how do I get on this podcast? Well, I think, how do they get in touch? I shouldn't jump the gun. I shouldn't just tell people, direct people anywhere, and then we ignore them because that's not actually where we want in. But I guess if you're interested, how should they get in contact?
Personally, you can just DM me. I don't care. My DMs are open, or comment on any of the YouTube videos because I look at those comments. I don't know about you. Is that the same story for you?
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I'm kind of like a scout too. I might just
Okay.
I might just put the feelers out. If there's a new hack that's out there. I already did that to one hack which got announced, and I think they'll do it once they get a demo out. I think so. So that'll be good.
Okay. Very exciting stuff. News segment.
Yes, and there has been a lot of news since we last recorded, just through all the different things that have been released. I think the thing that I'm really excited about the most is an update to Psychic Puppets, which was the one of the hacks of the third hack jam. And really, it's a great hack. Please play it, and hopefully we will get 8X on to talk about his hack and Blizzard Island guide as well. But there's now sort of some new post-game content for that hack. I can't really say exactly why this is significant because it's kind of a spoiler. But there is a cave dungeon called Western Cave. If you complete that first time. For the first all 99 floors of that dungeon, you'll unlock what's called pressure mode, which is I guess it's basically a glass cannon mode, really, where your attack stats are higher, your defense stats are lower, and if you use a damaging move, that's it. You get one shot to you get one shot to use a damage damage moves, so it's kind of like a challenge dungeon. But I think the one that people have been really enjoying the most is playground mode, which is where you can just play the game with whatever Pokemon you want, any combination you like, and I think a lot of people have already had quite a lot of fun about that. So that's Psychic Puppets. What's next? Oh yes, for those interested in balance hacks, and we are going to be talking a lot about balance hacks this episode. This episode, Explorers of Heaven and Hell has released their final update. I just got to get it up on my screen. Sorry, this is the wrong one. I actually don't have any information about what that is. I forgot they didn't actually put a post about it on the SkyTemple Discord, and I don't. But there is I assume there's a YouTube video detailing the changes. I apologize to the developer of Heaven and Hell.
There is a YouTube video. I've seen that popping up in my recommended. So I think if you just look up the guy's YouTube channel, I think you pronounce it Babou, Babou. You'll find that trailer. It's been popping off too. So
absolutely. What's next? There's also been a couple of teasers. So there's been a teaser for version 1.2 of PMD Delusion, which was this was a hack made for Hack Jam 2, if I'm not mistaken, because I seem to remember there's a Phantump in there, and an Esper, and a Shiny Umbreon. I'm not 100% familiar with the Hack Jam 2 hacks. I didn't really play any of them, but if you remember PMD Delusion, there is an update hopefully coming out soon for that. And also, there's been a teaser put out for a hack called PMD Whisper of Wisdom, which is kind of like the main premise of that hack is kind of like a one-shot kind of thing, where sort of the player is sort of an invisible third force that's guiding the protagonists along, I suppose, where it's kind of like they acknowledge the existence of it, but there's not really not yet anyway, an existential kind of dread about that. Which is kind of like how one-shot works. It's all very... Yeah, exactly. And as well, too, I got to plug myself, the new episode of PMD Retold is out now. I somehow managed to get 18 minutes out of the Scizor arc. And basically half of that episode is me doing a Spinder's Cafe scenario, because I didn't put Spinder's Cafe in the original because I was trying to emulate Time and Darkness first with the main story. But so 9 minutes of that is actually introducing Spinder's Cafe, and then the other 9 minutes is trying to at least give some dialogue to that part of the game. But if you haven't seen the latest episode, if nothing else, watch it for the Spinder's Cafe section. I think it's probably one of my best comedic works, and introduces a brand new character trait for Mitchell. And I think you'll love it. I'm biased, of course, but yeah, that's the news.
Thank you very much for the news segment. We're going to be jumping right into the subject of episode 5, Explorers of Azure Sky. This is the first. I personally consider this a quality of life hack or a balance hack. There are some story changes that before Yakko, you plan on going pretty deep into this, but before you do that, I want to get all my stuff off the table first for this hack.
Go ahead.
So let's get this part of it just established before I say anything. Both of us have not played any quality of life, balance, whatever hacks before this, and I think we both didn't do that for the same reason, which is we've played Explorers of Sky about 10 billion times, so we kind of don't want to sit through the same story again. But that said, I did generally have a pretty positive experience going through this. And let's see, I have a couple points that I want to make sure I hit. I don't want to ramble too hard here. Right, yeah. Another really important thing about this hack that I think, kind of a reason why I wanted to have this spotlighted at some point, is that this hack is trying to have at least some degree of changes to the story and also be full-length hack. And you know, this is something that I have periodically said on this podcast, but I think it is really important to continually remind people that completed full-length hacks are the future of the community. The top 4 most downloaded, most discussed, you know, most relevant outside of the immediate SkyTemple bubble. Top 4 most relevant, whatever you want to say. I'm talking in circles already. Top 4 hacks in terms of popularity: Explorers of Skies, Explorers of Alpha, Explorers of Heaven and Hell, and Explorers of the Spirit. I know I'm saying my own hack, but it's kind of true. Unless anyone wants to refute that. But I think that what all 4 of these have in common is that they're all full-length, complete, and playable. And this is... I want to say this without ruffling any feathers. But if you are a creator and your primary goal is that you want to get the casual eyes, the general PMD community, you want to get these kinds of eyes that aren't going to be so in-depth in looking at every new ROM hack that comes out. People that aren't listening to this podcast, obviously, because if you're listening to this, then you're more in-depth than pretty much everyone who just played Explorers of Sky as a kid in 2009 and liked it. If you're trying to reach those kinds of people, you need to make a full hack. I'm sorry. This is a tough pill to swallow, but that's just the truth. And so someone that is trying to do that, I do feel like we should be supporting them, because there's people that to this day continually say things along the lines of, I had no idea that Explorers of Sky ROM hacks existed after all this time. And SkyTemple's been out for 2 years, and we had an episode earlier talking about PMD chip, a hack that came out in January 2020. So if we want to get more people to realize that this stuff is out there and there's all these great creations, I do think that it's important that we promote hacks that are more likely to get the casual eyes in. So there's my rant there. Probably not the last time I'm going to say that, because it's something that I feel very strongly about. Now, about this hack in particular, Explorers of Azure Sky it plays a little bit harder, as implied, because it's a balance hack, a little bit harder than Explorers of Sky. But I went into the ROM. I don't know if you did this, Yakko, actually went into SkyTemple and looked at all the specific changes that were made. But by the way, there's also so much fucking documentation he has. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But in terms of actual dungeon changes that are made in this game, there are some Pokemon species swapping in and out, but a lot of the difficulty change comes purely from new moves and abilities that are assigned to the mons inside the dungeon, the actual rebalancing of all the mons themselves. Because the stuff like the spawn rate of everything, and the base stats and the stat growth of every mon, and also the levels of all enemies in the dungeons is all the same. I thought that was pretty interesting. That might be something that I ask about later in the interview, if I remember, because I'll just say from my perspective, the way that I go about balancing, I think the biggest obstacle to trying to balance dungeons in this game is that the damage formula is fucked, for lack of a better term. And it heavily weighs levels. So you can do all the, RPG level design stuff you want. But if you're a certain number of levels lower or higher than an enemy, that is favored so heavily in the damage formula that it basically doesn't matter. It's not very hard to get to a point where enemies are doing 1 damage to you, for example. Like, you don't have to go very many levels over them, that type of thing. So even without adjusting levels, it does feel like it's a new experience and a harder experience, which I think is harder to pull off than a lot of people realize. So credit for that. Oh, by the way, I don't know how far into this section, but I think I think it should already be implied that there's no spoiler section. Or if there is, maybe it'll just be everything that Yakko talks about, because that's when we're going to get to the story. I don't know. But yeah, the other thing is, you have something to say?
Oh, no, you keep going. Keep going.
Okay. I didn't want to cut you off, my bad. I know I'm big talker sometimes.
No, I do have something to say about the dungeon design in myself in particular, but I'll let you, because you might say it yourself.
Okay. Just one more thing, I swear. So this guy, in the download for this ROM hack, there is a 500-page PDF. This is not a shitpost. There's 500-page PDF of documentation in the download. And let me pull it up right now. I'm sure you could hear my keyboard right there. EOAS Pokemon Changes.pdf. This shit is 4 times the size of the X Delta file. And this is like the most detailed documentation I've ever seen for any hack, period. It's actually pretty insane. Every single mon in the game, their full, like their new abilities and their new learn set is just listed out. Then also all the other like higher concept, high level changes that were made. This is something that a lot of people, creators, developers, whatever you want to call it, don't want to do, including myself, for obvious reasons, because it's a lot of work. But I'm sure that a lot of people appreciate this, and some I almost feel like there's a little bit of old school game design philosophy here, in which you are encouraged to play this hack while having the strategy guide open next to you while you're playing. You get what I'm saying? I get a little bit of that, where I started doing that at some point during my playthrough, and I'm almost certain that's the case. I wonder if there's any kind of like nostalgia for some of these, like what I call the Game Facts era of late aughts games that feel almost based around the strategy guide. And a lot of the times I think that's used as like a derogatory, but not necessarily. I can think of a lot of games that just feel really unique in that sense, where like you don't need outside documentation. There's a lot of like discovery that you can figure out on your own, and that's awesome too, but the option's always there to have that stuff. So I don't know if that idea resonates with you, but maybe I'm just nostalgic for that time period, and that's kind of like where my brain went immediately. But I thought that was pretty cool. That's something that I think would just purely make every hack better if they did that. Had that documentation, but obviously it's hard, and there's a trade-off to doing that, where you could be putting that time towards something else.
Yeah.
That's under my
I used the document just to see, out of curiosity, what had changed with the different Pokemon. Like, for instance, I did, even though that it wasn't in my team, I had a look to see, say, what were the changes to Chimchar, for instance, and I noticed that there's now a second ability there that I don't think was in the original. And also just seeing the effort and time put into that, I think I think I really, really appreciate it, and I totally get you too when you talk about the nostalgia for the strategy guide era. Whenever a new Pokemon game came out, a new Pokemon, like, it wasn't enough to just get the game. I also got the strategy guide, and it wasn't so much that I used it while playing. It was just nice to have as a reference. It was also very handy as a Pokedex. I could see what all the new
Oh, yeah.
Pokemon were. I want, you sort of seeing all the obscure ones that you're never going to catch anyway, because they're like, you got to catch it like 2 a.m. in the morning when the wind is blowing on a spring day in December or something, like one of those, one of those low percentage chance encounters. And actually, it's quite funny you mentioned the strategy guide too, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here that's probably not related to the hack, but I've still got the Explorers of Sky strategy guide, and I actually sometimes, instead of opening SkyTemple to find out how many floors a dungeon has or whatnot, I just open up the guide and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, 15 floors. I can see how
That's
how
very
long
helpful.
this is. Like sometimes during my playthrough, like I even looked through it. I thought, okay, because I only have a limited amount of time to play these things, what with work and everything. So if I enter a dungeon, I'm like, okay, how long is this going to take me to get through the dungeon?
Yeah, that's crazy that you have the Explorers of Sky strategy guide. I am scared to look up how much that goes for on secondhand sale nowadays. Probably way too much.
I think one of the first couple of pages is almost torn out, so I think it's only, for me, the resale value is not much. But I think I've got strategy guides for almost every Pokemon game since. I still reckon if I dig it up, there's a gold and silver one there somewhere, or at least crystal. One of the, I think that was the earliest, and yeah, when the new Pokemon game came out, it was game cartridge and strategy guide.
Mm-hmm. Nowadays, we're just way off topic now, but nowadays some devs will do a instead of having a strategy guide, they'll sell the art book. If you buy the super deluxe $100 edition of the game.
Yeah.
I've never personally bought any of those, but I've been tempted sometimes to just like buy the art book on its own after beating the game. That's happened with me a couple times. And then I see how much just the art book costs on its own, secondhand, and I say, never mind. But yeah. Okay, you want to start talking about your part, and then I guess we'll say this is the spoiler section.
Yeah.
But not really, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess where I'm most comfortable with approaching a discussion like this is, yes, this is a balance hack, but this is also a hack that does involve, I think, quite a significant story change. And I think if you're going to do a balance hack, and I think you said it earlier, Max, that you really do need to almost incentivize those that sort of, you don't want to just be playing through the game again. So, but you got to, writing it, just putting a lines for a talking protagonist. To me, I don't think, myself as a writer, I don't think that's enough, because if you're just going to add some lines to the vanilla dialogue and call it a day, you may as well just play the original Explorers of Sky and self-insert your own thoughts and your own minds into the character that you got. You sort of, the hacks that tackle the talking protagonist problem or challenge is that it needs to be molded into its own distinct entity. And I guess if you're going to do that, you also got to then create new pieces of lore to justify those changes. So I guess, just talking about my hack, because having worked on it for 1.5 years, I did that by really leaning into sort of the shonen anime Saturday afternoon anime tropes, where it's like hero with hero's journey kind of stuff, and trying to mold it in to the ethos of Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, with giving a few quirks to the character too, for example, the fear of water, and also developing that deeper backstory between the main character and Grovile. And Azure Sky also does it the same way. They mold their player character into one that I think it's been pulled off really well. It's one where the player, the protagonist, they take their time to mentally adjust with his surroundings. So in one of the early scenes, there's that sort of higher element of doubt about their visions. The waterfall cave mission, I think, is really interesting to show that sort of the player's not sort of 100% upfront with his partner straight up, and that leads to some tension. And I really kind of enjoyed that. The player and partner kind of take their time to bond. It's not sort of just instantly click your fingers straight away. Yep, okay, these two are best friends for life. Like, it sort of didn't really get explored much in the vanilla game. It's kind of like, okay, here's your partner, and off you go. And sort of that introspection of that new world isn't really there. At least that's what I've implied from the dialogue in the game. And so then when they become more comfortable with their surroundings, you sort of see that then come out. They are much more emotional than the vanilla character. They're much more sort of standing up for what's right. They are much, much angrier with Grovile and his actions than perhaps the vanilla protagonist is. And that's all backed up by the lore. The lore is also been really built up in Azure Sky. I really enjoyed the fact that there are these peppered little references to Rescue Team in there once or twice throughout the game. The reference to the Ninetales legend early on, that was pretty cool. And as two sort of building up legendaries like Groudon, Kyogre, and Dialga and Palkia as the firstborn and created from the original one, which I presume is Arceus. And sort of the lore and the defined player character, you need those two ingredients to give a much more defined life to what you're doing. Because I think, as I said before, I mean, the whole point the player is mute outside of Thought Bubble is, at the end of the day, it isn't just a visual novel, but an interactive experience. And so if you're going to change that interactive experience, you need to have narrative justifications, I guess, as to why. I guess for me personally, it's not enough to just put lines on the protagonist and call it a day, because in essence, you've got an empty slate. The protagonist is mute, so which is the whole point of it, so that you can project your own personality and thoughts and motivations behind the character. And a lot of people don't like that about the fact that they're mute. People talk about, people that have sort of looked at stuff like Retold or Azure Sky or other talking protagonist hacks. They're like, oh, I love that the protagonist can talk now. I never liked how, he just said his own thoughts and just, the partner was almost their mouthpiece. They were saying the words that they should have said. But for the purposes of ROM hacking, and I'm rambling here, I'm probably not making too much sense in the way I'm structuring these sentences, but I think for me, the mute protagonist, as much as we don't like it, it's actually probably one of the greatest strengths of the game in terms of ROM hacking, because there is no defined character for the player, and it is set in a world with so many loose ends that we can have multiple fan works with multiple different interpretations of what this world is and what the character is, and no one really minds, because it's not, say, fan fiction where you might be changing an already established character or world, and then that messes up with everyone's headcanons. And I mean, it's like you're not sort of reading something and going, oh, this person wouldn't do this, because that's not their character, because the protagonist is a clean slate. I mean, even your Explorers of the Spirit, that's another one that, I think Spirit, Azure Sky, Retold, they've given 3 completely different interpretations of the world of PMD and the character of the main the main protagonist, and no one's really disputing which is which, I suppose. Like, if that makes sense. Like, no one's sort of talking about the canon within the fan canon.
Yeah, I really agree with this. Before we go further, we've had this discussion off camera, off air, whatever, before about PMD is a series where there's a non-trivial amount of people who legitimately get into this series from fan comics and fan fiction before knowing about the video game. Name me any other video game series where that happens. Like, literally none. You know, it's really kind of the beauty of, and again, I say beauty, but there's a lot of people who don't like that exact thing. But these games are written in a very, you know, a vague enough way where it's almost all into world building, all into set dressing, and then everything else is up to interpretation. So yeah, basically I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. That it's good you stopped me there, because I actually had nothing really else to say. I started writing like my thoughts about sort of this, because I think this is a really good episode this is probably the first hack that that's a quality of life hack that is sort of just a general interpretation of the story that I guess isn't retold. And so I had some time to think about it, and I ended up writing 3/4 of a page about six paragraphs worth of notes. Yeah, I had a bit to say, and I guess for me, I would much, you know, I'm always going to prioritize story over gameplay. So even though, you know, stuff like Alpha and Heaven and Hell, they are, you know, full length hacks. You know, my eye is more turned to the original story hacks. So I think both, you know, I think all us three, you know, yourself, myself, and Mr. L, who we'll interview shortly, you know, we all have that experience writing a talking protagonist and remolding the PMD story. And I think I'm really interested to see what he says later on, just about what he sort of sees in the PMD world.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to put it. It is, yeah, like you said, it is literally just kind of reimagining all these things through a new lens, because there are a bunch of little, like, actual, like you alluded to earlier, lore bits that are added in this game, and this kind of transitions into I think we can both talk about our favorite parts of this hack. I really like the expansion on Yuxi, Mesprit, and Azelf in this hack, who are basically not characters in the original game. There's a lot of you know, hot take. There's a lot of Explorers of Sky characters that are kind of not really characters. They're just there. And I think Yuxi, Mesprit, Azelf definitely fall into that category. But they've just in what's been released of this hack so far, up to chapter 14, I believe. There's definitely a lot more. Go ahead.
Oh, don't worry, I was gonna say about halfway through chapter 14, up until they meet Celebi.
Okay, yeah. The chapters kind of blend together for me at some point. I knew it was in the future somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere in the future.
But yeah, there's yeah, the Yuxi, Mesprit, Azelf scene is pretty cool. Because, you know, what's interesting about that is that that's not something that really has to happen. You know, you can see why a lot of what happens with those characters happens off screen in the original Explorers, because it doesn't need to be on screen to be explained. But with it being on screen, and it's not even that much of like a reinterpretation as much as just like expanding on what happens. It does make their actions have definitely a lot more weight. And by the time you get to the Mesprit boss fight. It does feel a lot cooler, I guess is how I want to put that. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for that. Also, the Groudon fight, I have a bullet on here. So Groudon has Earth power in this hack, and I had a Fire type partner. So that fight is pretty fun. That's definitely the wake up call moment of this hack for me. I think once you get to like that fight and then Ant Plains and beyond, that's when it starts to get noticeably harder. Everything up to that it felt about the same difficulty as the original, but
yeah. I mean, I actually found the game probably stepped up for me actually around Apple Woods, and the first encounter with a Pokemon with a room clearing move. So, there are a couple of fairy type Pokemon in this game. And the fairy type is patched into the game and all and you do have the Flabébé line in this game, and and now normally I don't have I have a policy of no recruits through my playthroughs, but after seeing just the damage that Flabébé's Fairy Wind could do, I could just especially if it went into a large room, like as soon as Flabébé was like, "Hey, can I join your team?" I was like, "Right, I'm recruiting you, and I'm using you as a defense against any room clearers whenever I can." Couldn't do it during the expedition, but yeah, I had to break that rule just so I could feel like I could get on terms with the room clearers in the game. And it's funny you mentioned the Groudon fight myself, because I think I somehow accidentally had easy mode for a less difficult mode, because I ended up with Bulbasaur as the player and Piplup as the partner, and basically Groudon's ability was pretty much his their demise, because the weather being sunny, chlorophyll has been added to the game for Bulbasaur. So then Bulbasaur gets 2 moves every turn. Grass type is effective for ground. So is water. I had sleep powder in my moveset. I think he laid 1 move, and that was it.
yeah, that sounds that sounds like you kind of steamrolled him. Then that makes sense to me.
Yeah. But I definitely, for me, the difficulty itself ramped up around, I would say around Ant Plains Quicksand Cave. But again, I had a very favorable typing. I think if I was my sort of Team Firespark team of Chimchar and Pikachu, I don't think I would have had it as easily.
That's how it goes sometimes. That's another thing where probably don't want to get too deep into talking about this, because we went farther than planned as usual. But having to balance around all the different permutations of starters and partners you can have is not easy, folks. Anyone who has ever tried to make a hack with a full starter list can attest to that. That is not easy. So, yeah, getting anywhere close, in my opinion, is pretty impressive. And you're always going to have these kinds of discrepancies. Anything else you want to add at the last second before the interview, or we just go?
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I think for me, the other thing I want to mention, and I think what really drives the difference in this game between the player and the partner, is the lights of the stockade scene. It actually caught me a bit off guard, in that and I'm talking about the part where the player hugs the partner, like it's an actual physical manifestation of, I guess, emotion in that game, and that really caught me off guard. And I thought it was a neat little difference. It's sort of different to just the motivational speaking that normally happens in this game. It's that show. It's the actual show of emotion. I don't know what you thought of that scene in the context of the hack, Max.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that is um without the benefit of animations, it's very hard to pull off, right? A lot of people just don't want to try it, myself included. But yeah, I think that one turned out well, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did do it once myself in Retold, but I think I tried. I think I did. That was the scene where sort of I didn't explicitly say it, but it was when Grovile was pushing Dust Noir into the dimensional hole um, in the Hidden Land, and I made it so it looked like originally that it was just Mitchell sort of hugging his friend, like his, even though he didn't remember him, and then it gets revealed 2-3 minutes later that it was sort of there were two motivations behind it. There was also a dimensional scream element to it as well, which so I mean it can be done, but it really does have to be. I think there's a narrow window you can pull it off, and I think that scene it was definitely pulled off quite well, I think. So yeah, that's all I had to say. In addition, I just thought I'd get that out there before the interview.
All right. And with that, we are going to cut the commercial, cue the music. And we're back from the music transition that I add in. We are joined by Mr. L, who's joined us to talk about some Explorers of Azure Sky. How are you doing on this fine evening?
Doing okay.
All right, excellent. Let's let's get started. We don't have a good first question on here. I'm realizing now from the whole listen here, but I guess let's start out with the classic. How did you get into SkyTemple? Figure out about SkyTemple? Want to start ROM hacking? That's all kind of the same question, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get started?
I guess I should start with how I got into PMD, because that's related. It was a lot of very similar. I remember watching the first episode of the podcast, and I remember what you said, Yakko, basically how you got into the series, and it was kind of the same thing for me, where I got Time or Darkness. I don't really remember which one it was. I have both, but I now at least, and I didn't get to play Sky until actually 2018. But I had Time or Darkness, and I just fell in love with the story. The gameplay was addicting. I love the post game especially. Um, Everything about it was just the best thing I'd ever seen, and it's still my favorite game of all time. Um, but when it comes to sort of hacking, I actually started kind of messing around with a lot of the main series hacks with particularly Renegade Platinum, which is made by Drano. He's amazing. Check out his stuff if you ever want to play the main series stuff, or if you haven't. Um, but what I would do was, I would just go in and I would mess with aspects of the game, like changing little things like Pokemon types or whatever. Um, and I remember that, mystery dungeon hacks were always something that I really wanted to get into, but it was just, everything I found online was always saying that the tools just either didn't exist or it wasn't worth it. And then it was I go on Reddit one day and I see Para's posts on it about this thing he's making, and it was that moment of no way. This thing I had been hoping would become a thing for years started to finally become an actual reality. Uh and yeah, I basically just followed his progress up until it officially released. And that was kind of how I got into it. So
Yeah, I think the both of us found out about SkyTemple from Hare's Reddit post back then too.
Yeah.
Is that got a lot of buzz when it came out, so it was kind of hard to miss. PMD stuff. But yeah, that's dope. You want to ask a question, Echo?
Yeah, sure. So look, I went on a long rambling about sort of writing and rewriting the Explorers story, and I guess the challenges about that. So I guess, how difficult did you find the process of rewriting Explorers with a talking protagonist and the additional lore that you had?
Yeah, I will say that, like, first off, a lot of it was probably kind of inspired by Retold, actually. Like, but when I started off doing hacking, it was kind of like I was just doing it for a personal project, and it still kind of is in a way, but it was a lot of like I never really thought of doing any of like editing any of the story. I thought I was just gonna go in and like change things about the Pokemon and stuff, and then call it a day. And then like I Retold came out and all these other things, and I was like, wait, this might actually be interesting to mess around with. Um, and so I kind of just briefly started messing around with editing and learning how to change the dialogue and stuff. And I'd say it's been a little bit difficulty. I kind of tend to struggle with writer's block. I'm not much of a writer. I'm more of an artist. But I always like went with the mentality of like, at least for the protagonist, like what would an ordinary person do in the scenario like they've been put in, uh, in this, yeah. So like, for example, the scene where Team Skull get hired by Chadot, uh, I always kind of felt like, oh, these people who are basically bullied us this entire time have now suddenly been hired on, and especially when they start getting like praised by Chadot, and it obviously that any person would feel like understandably irritated about that. And so yeah, that's how I've been thinking about writing the protagonist. And as for like lore, I'm like a huge lore nerd. I play a lot of Destiny, and the lore for that game is just balls to the walls. Like thousands and thousands of lore entries. Like even the actual sort of mannerisms that like players have adopted, like people will like dance all the time in the middle of combat, and it's like that's an actual thing that has been adapted as lore, which is really funny. um but because of that, I always spend time thinking about world building and like how to flesh things out. I'm sure you've seen me in the Hack Ideas channel like all the time, because I am just always thinking of things to add. um a lot of it also comes from the comic PMD Victory Fire, which is amazing, and the world building in that comic is like 10 out of 10. Uh, so a lot of like the lore that I basically sort of adapted as my own kind of lore has been incorporated from that comic. So yeah.
Quick question. We actually talked earlier about how PMD is so huge for fan comics and fan fiction.
Hmm.
How many people do you think got into PMD through Victory Fire before playing the games? I think it's more than we probably think.
That's a good question. Like I forget when I first found Victory Fire. Like it feels like it wasn't that long ago, but it was probably like either 2016 or 2017. So that's, uh going on 5 years ago now. Probably late over that. And yeah, like I think Victory Fire, and this is like a little spoilers for it, but not like anything major, but Victory Fire does a lot of like melding both the main series and PMD.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of helped a lot of people get into it, because it's like if you're a fan of the main series, you might enjoy this comic because it has parts of the main series. But if you're also a fan of Mystery Dungeon, then you might get into the main series. So it's yeah, I think that definitely helps it.
Victory Fire is so crazy, man.
Yeah.
That's I mean, that is like the PMD comic, or it is like the one that gets recommended, and it's been going
such a
on forever.
shame. Yeah, it's such a shame that it's basically on indefinite hiatus. I
Yeah,
would love to see if someone was able to make like a ROM hack of it, like, or based on it. That would be amazing.
that's actually an interesting idea. I mean, that there's so much that you would have to do. That seems like there'd be a lot of stuff where you'd have to really think
Yeah.
outside the box to translate it, but it would be cool.
I know that like I saw that someone made a proof of concept sort of thing of like the very beginning, very intro scene. There's not even any like actors or anything. It's literally just like the opening dialogue essentially.
Okay,
But that's like the only thing I've seen of anything regarding it.
interesting. Might hear more about that in 2025. Heck, that takes a long time. Um, next question here. So, this one that we came up with halfway going through is kind of related to all the, because we talked about the PDF that comes included in the download, obviously, because no one else is doing that, or even close to that right now. As far as I'm aware. Sorry, asterisk. I haven't played every hack ever, so sorry.
Yeah.
But including that much documentation is awesome, but I wonder, or Yak and I both wonder, if part of that is coming from, like, do you have any nostalgia for the strategy guide era, the GameFAQs era of gaming, where you would have that stuff open while you're playing all the time, and that was just something that you did when playing video games?
I did a little bit. I know my friend was big on that. Like he had this, I don't even know how many pages it was, but it was like, the 2 inches thick, uh, like ultimate player's guide or for Pokemon Platinum, and
Okay.
it had everything you could even ever think of for Platinum in it. And I know that I bought a couple of guides for I think Black and White and Black and White 2, but I would say more so the idea behind it was because like I said, I play a lot of, actually I don't know if I said it, but like I've played a lot of the main series hacks, and those typically have little documents in them saying like, hey, here's all the things that I've changed, and so that was kind of what that was inspired by. I do think it's helpful to go in though and look beforehand, because especially I have a tendency to be like, before I play a ROM hack, I'm like, oh, what Pokemon do I want to, at least for the main series, like I'm like, what Pokemon do I want to use? So I wind up going into that kind of document and then looking at it beforehand. So
Okay. Pretty cool. Yako, do you have another question?
Yes. So I know. Look, I have a few questions about like the like story and stuff. I know you said that it's sort of you're more of an artist than a writer, but I so feel free to answer as much or as little as you can. But I guess what I wanted to, and I talked a lot too in my ramble about how PMD Explorers has enough holes in it that you could rewrite Explorers in multiple different ways depending on what your headcanons are, and it makes sense to everyone. So I guess how closely does Azure Sky follow your own headcanons when you played the game?
I'd say it's pretty close. Like I said, a lot of my own personal canons kind of come from Victory Fire. I definitely have my plenty of my own. I'd say that like at least the current demo right now, I think it stops like right before the future arc. Whereas, is that correct? I don't remember. It's been a while.
Partially into
It's
it.
just after you meet, yeah, just after you meet Celebi.
Right. Okay. Uh, yeah. So that like I think there's a lot more of those headcanons present in sort of like the later parts of the future arc, as well as the post game or like they will be rather, because I haven't written that yet. But like particularly stuff with like I'm sure you've heard like there's probably been one or two references to them, but the Firstborn, which was a term used in Victory Fire, basically to like, well, kind of spoilers, but it's basically describes like all of the, I guess in quotation marks, big like box legendaries, so like, you know, Dialga and Palkia and stuff like that. But I've also tried to keep things like kind of close to the original, so I haven't gone like super crazy on the headcanons, just things enough to like flesh out the world a little bit and give a little bit more life. So yeah, but I definitely agreed with the idea that like the game has enough plot holes in it, which I didn't even really like realize until I was much older. How many there actually were. Um, and it's kind of, I feel like there haven't been enough or that many. Uh, I feel like there haven't been that many hacks that have sort of done rewrites of the story. I'm aware of like one that's been talked about, but I don't know if there's ever been any gameplay of that one out yet. So,
It's okay. You can say retold.
well, yes. Uh, I'll be honest, I like wasn't even thinking about Retold. I thought it was like, oh, that one's a given, but yeah.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. For anyone who's listening who's not really in like the SkyTemple Discord and always talking with those people, let me tell you, as someone who's been there pretty much since the beginning, the most discussed thing on that Discord in terms of wouldn't it be cool if the hack did this is every single plot hole in Explorers of Sky, which is a lot if you think about it for not even that long of an amount of time. You know, there's so many people that you know, almost like as soon as they come in, it's like, oh, I have an idea to make XYZ part of the game make more sense. And this is interesting because this kind of ties in again, Yakko, with what we were talking about earlier, how Explorers of Sky, how it was written, they put a lot of time and effort into world building, and they kind of let you fill in the blanks a lot of the time. You know, it's like they're encouraging you to theorize.
When you're 10, you do not notice the plot holes at all. And I think
Yeah.
that was what I was also going to say. Like, I don't think when any of us playing as kids really questioned the plot, it all made sense to our tiny minds.
All right, we just had to cut because of something going on in the background. You said that you were opening up a lore tab. What is that? What is the purpose of that?
Just so I can like remember it, because it's been a while since I've edited this, and like it has all of my like headcanons and stuff. It's like 10 pages long, but you know.
Nice.
That's crazy. That's I always don't document it and then forget it. Except I've done that pretty much all my life up until starting to actually like develop this ROM hack. But that's really cool that you've kept that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I that was the whole reason why Retold existed in the first place. It was just me writing down my headcanons for over a year in a narrative form. So I think I can relate a lot to that, to the lore tab.
Yeah, I mean, like, just in you know, I've also been like lately getting into D&D with some of my friends, and like, I think if the biggest thing for people who like want to get into kind of just creating, you know, whether it's their own world or their own characters or whatever, just like start thinking about things and then just writing them down. Like, I have this, you know, this one document that's like all of my headcanons and world building and stuff. But then I have this whole other document that's like all like actually, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's 17 pages long, and it's full of all of the characters and like potential concepts that I have that maybe we'll see the light of day. I would love to make like a ROM hack with all of them one day, but I don't know if that's uh in my skill set right now. Plus, I haven't even finished the one that I've been working on yet. So, well, we'll see. That'll be a potential
Again,
thing.
totally relatable.
Yeah.
I've been memeing a lot about this hack that I've thought of, but actually, like now I've had like this second idea for a second hack to close off Retold, and it's like, no, I'm never going to get to 4. I've been memeing about it, and now it'll never exist. Maybe that's the meme all along. It's like Morbius. That's why I said it's the
God.
Morbius of ROM hacks. uh,
And you're gonna be like one of these artists that announce like 25 albums coming out in 1 year, and then Reality Zero albums come out, or you get one.
yes.
That's just the best out of all those sessions.
Yes.
Okay, so that kind of flows into the next question, Mr. L. What is your this hack is through chapter 14, I believe we established earlier. I already forgot. I feel like shit for forgetting that. But
That's okay. I forget. I've already forgotten as well.
okay, perfect. So what is your long-term goal or vision for Azure Sky, and how do you think that it fits in the QOL hack landscape, or does that not matter, or is this just a personal thing for you and you just want to finish it, just to like you're saying, get your head cannons out there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of both. Like I said, or actually, I don't know if I said it. I brain no work so good. But like at first, it was kind of something that I did just for fun. I didn't really plan on making it public or anything. But like as I started to kind of edit things about it, and like I had the idea that maybe other people would find some enjoyment out of this, and I was like, all right, well maybe I'll share it. And that eventually led me to releasing the first demo. Um, as for like my plans, eventually I'd like to have all of the main story, which I'm uh at the very tip end of chapter 16, but I am bad with writer's block and motivation. Uh, and I'd like to have, so yeah, I'm almost done with the main story. I'd like to also have all of the post game, ideally the special episodes, and also like the little miscellaneous things like NPC dialogue, like basically totally completely rewritten to fix as many of the weird like translation errors. Like I know there's one line from like Cresselia that's very weirdly written, and like there's little things like that. That's just like an example. And it would also be neat to add, things like brand new scenes, potentially dungeons. I'd like to add a bunch more new Pokemon, but I've been nervous to add the one patch that expands it to like 2,000 entries or whatever, because apparently there's a bunch of unknown bugs about that thing.
Oh yeah,
So
I haven't touched that either. I'm letting that's at Eswick. We're gonna have him on here one point, but I know he is actually using it, so he's the guinea pig for the rest of us.
oh boy. But to answer the quality of life thing, I'd say it's kind of like right in the middle. I don't think it's close, like even remotely, to something like Alpha, because I think the I think the amount of stuff that Mond has put into the Alpha is insane. Like, I would love to have a lot of those things, but I don't know if it's within my capabilities, and he has not made any of them like public, which is uh, but like yeah, I would like to add a lot more quality of life things if it like falls within my, I guess, capabilities. But I know that it kind of feels like a lot of the potential things I could add requires delving into ASM, which I have zero knowledge of, like where to even start with any of that. So I don't know.
Heard that.
Yeah, 8X is a freaking wizard.
Yeah, shouts to 8X, shouts to N, shouts to Irqueer, rest in peace. Shouts to whoever. There's actually a lot of other people behind the scenes too that have done stuff just years. But yeah. Okay, so here's another question. This one that I'm really curious about. That for Azure Sky, you put a lot of effort, obviously, into rebalancing the entire cast. And I'm wondering why. And I feel like you may have answered this earlier when you said that you liked going through the post game of this game. But part of what I was thinking is, like, what really compelled you to go through all that work and go through the entire game and rebalance every single moveset and every the abilities for all of them? And I asked that because I did not do that in my hack because I didn't care. I felt like that's way past diminishing returns at that point, in my opinion. But obviously, it mattered enough to you, so I'm just wondering why.
Yeah, it certainly did take me a pretty good chunk of time when I was first starting out. But yeah, like I said, I actually really do enjoy the replayability of the game. Once you, excuse me, once you pass the post game, like I would just spend hours and hours and hours like getting as many missions in like the same dungeon and just going in and just doing all of them all in one go, and that was like I would just do that for hours and I would have so much fun. um and like I said, I've played a lot of like the main series hacks, and typically I really enjoy the kind of changes they make to Pokemon. Like the big one I always think of is Renegade Platinum changes Flygon to be a bug dragon type, which is like really really cool, and it's also like a very unique typing, which I don't think there's. I haven't played much of Gen 8 or whatever Sword and Shield is, so I don't know if there is a bug dragon in that one, but
There's not.
okay. uh but like my thought, so I always consider myself, at least when it comes to the main series, as like a semi-competitive battler, and basically like what that means is like I typically like to stick to the Pokemon that I like, even if they aren't considered in like big air quotes good. So like one of my favorite Pokemon is Rampardos, and like Rampardos is not a very good Pokemon in terms of the competitive community. But I always try and make them to be like as best as they can possibly be. So like maxing out all of the stats that like matter for them and everything like that. And so my mentality going into stuff like this has always been like, what, at least in my opinion, would make this Pokemon good? As again in quotation marks. I know that's kind of like it's a bit different when it comes to PMD because like for one, stats don't really matter because every stat can go up to its maximum, and two, the gameplay is just very very different. And a lot of moves are very different to how they work in the main series. So as a result, a lot of Pokemon are actually better because of just the moves that they get, and less so because of like, oh, they don't have a very like a quote unquote good ability. But I always just like have been kind of an advocate for fun over not necessarily okay, fun, not necessarily over sorry, fun but not necessarily balanced. So I'm not totally sure how balanced everything is. But for me, the changes that I've made, I think they breathe new life into Pokemon and they make them interesting and fun to use, and just give, like, as again for the post game, they allow people to like just experiment and just use as many different Pokemon as they can to see what's new and what makes them potentially fun. So that's my mentality.
It makes sense. Makes sense. Get it. So yeah, it definitely sounds like the goal is definitely to get to post game at some point, based on that.
Yeah.
I'd say that.
long-winded answer. I tend to ramble, so.
No, it's perfect. We all do here.
We all do. So I want to get your views on self-insertion because it's something else that I talked about in the rambling that I had before the interview. So I want to know, did you write the protagonist dialogue with self-insertion still in mind, or do you see them as their own distinctive character? Because I guess that is the one thing that you can potentially lose when, I mean, at least in my opinion, you can lose when you have a talking protagonist. And
Right.
and I know Azure Sky still it doesn't have a set team. You still can choose from the starter list. You can still name whoever you name the Pokemon however you like. So yeah, what do you think about self insertion and in the game?
Uh, so I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but essentially, yeah, my mentality going into it was like, what would just a regular person think in
Mm.
this scenario? And like I did kind of try to keep it as close to the original, but also like giving them enough of a more, I guess, general personality, because I guess my mentality going into it was almost like, what if retold but playable? uh, so, um, yeah, I kind of tried to keep it, or I try to kind of keep it a little bit, you know, like just general and open to having someone go in with whatever character or whatever Pokemon they want to play as, and because I I mean, when it comes to self-insertion, I think it can be certainly be a hit or miss thing. So I wouldn't want to have and I also don't have haven't established, I guess, my own characters enough, I think, in order for it to be like this game is specifically with these two characters. Maybe with like a future thing, but yeah, for now I wanted basically to create like, yeah, my plan was basically to create kind of a similar hack to what like I've said, a lot of the main series ones do, where they're basically like a enhancement hack. So it's just the base game, but has a lot of different or things that make it, I guess, quote unquote, better than the original.
Cool. That is no, that's good, and I think that's the line for this episode's title, Max. Retold but playable. That's
All
my
right.
vote.
Okay. Perfect.
uh, all right, so I'm done with my story questions. I do have one more that I wrote down here, and it's a pretty general one, and you may have touched on it before, but where do you see the hacking scene going in the future? So we've had sort of 2 years, but where do you see it progressing sort of in the next 6 months, year, maybe 2 years? I don't know how far out you want to go, but yeah,
Yeah.
I know we've asked this of other hack makers, so I'm keen to hear your view.
Yeah, I think someone said it on a previous episode, but like I really think that like this is funny, but the sky is the limit. Uh, like the hack jams are just like completely totally insane. Like I remember I admittedly I haven't played many hacks. That's something I keep meaning to do more of, but like I played Turnabout Dimension because I'm a huge Ace Attorney fan, which I guess that's spoilers for the hack, but whatever. You, um, but like it was the one that I was like, I cannot believe I'm still playing Mystery Dungeon. Like I was like, this is just Ace Attorney. I like, um, and I'd love to finally get things like the ever sought after custom music and going around things that are hard coded. I would also love to see more full length original story things, which by the way, Spirit was great. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like yeah, since because I think while we have plenty of original stuff with the jams, it would be wonderful to see people's ideas for like I guess as other people have said in the podcast, PMD 5 sort of deal with just like a completely new story, because I feel like there aren't that many of those outside of the little jams. So
Yeah, so that's pretty much the consensus. We all want PMD 5. And we're not going to get it officially. Sorry, I don't know. Maybe you guys think we will, but
every Pokemon Presents, I hope.
I am woefully optimistic.
Who knows? Maybe. I didn't think we'd get a Rescue Team remake. I thought the series was like super dead after Super Mystery Dungeon came out, but we'll see. But yeah, either way, we need to make PMD 5. I think is okay. Now here's a tough question, Mr. L. Do you have any plans or estimated release date you want to drop on us for getting through the main story of Azure Sky?
Oh boy. Main story. I mean, I guess the main story I would like to be done with by the end of this year, but I don't want to put any kind of specific ETA, because a little bit, about me. I am like recently just graduated college, and so I'm in the process of looking at places and trying to figure things out with where I'm gonna go. So I have a lot on my plate right now. And yeah, I also tend to struggle with motivation, like I said earlier, and writer's block is also a problem. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to get at least the main story done by the end of this year, but I'm not gonna put a pin in that until I know for sure.
Okay. And then if we are assuming that happens and the game is going to be, if we are going to make it to the credits by the end of the year, tell me in 30 seconds or less, why is Azure Sky going to win Hack of the Year?
Oh boy, I knew this was coming. I'd say that Azure Sky would become Hack of the Year because it gives the best of both worlds, because it gives a quality of life changes while also having its own take on a story that is familiar to fans, but is different enough to give them a unique perspective.
Okay, great. And any final words that you want to say?
I don't know. I guess I will say, like, I don't know if this is something that, happened with Spirit, but, I'm a one-person team, and it feels like sometimes I don't totally know, whether or not my hack is something that's, I guess, balanced, or even, like, how people think about it, because I feel like I haven't actually gotten that much feedback on it, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, throw feedback at me. I'm always open to change and advice and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Great thing to edit on, and we will talk about that after the podcast concludes. That's it. Thank you for watching, everyone.
Thanks,
episode
everyone.
5.
Thanks for joining.